Today's video, I wanted to talk about the 11 worst things there is to being over 400 pounds. I'm sure it just gets worse as you get heavier. So I wanted to talk about that. This is something I've never talked about on my channel. Let's talk about it. This is Ryan over at High Carb Regenerator. Welcome to my channel. By the end of this video, you're going to know what it's like to be over 400 pounds. If you are over 400 pounds, you already know what I'm talking about. So here, let's get started. So number 11. 100%, I think everybody knows about this one. Getting called names, getting called whatever, whatever people want to call you is absolutely infuriating, because most of us don't do this on purpose. Most of us don't do this on purpose. Most of us don't realize. Back to it. All right, so most of us don't realize that it's completely hormone based. I mean, not completely. I mean, there's external factors to this. You know, some people eat for different reasons, but by and large, it's hormone based. You started off with a bad set of hormones, and you have to correct that. So that is number one, is getting called names. Number 10. One of the more infuriating things, especially if you're not into this, is being told to eat less. Everybody tells you to eat like 8 calories a day, eat lettuce sandwich made of lettuce, and exercise 3 hours a day, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. These people who are at this weight already have an issue of some kind. They probably have very low self-esteem. They probably have very high cortisol. They probably have adrenal fatigue. They probably have liver issues already, right? So if you tell them to eat less and exercise more, what is that going to do? That is going to raise their cortisol more, create more adrenal fatigue, and ruin your liver even more. And then your kidneys are going to get screwed, and then your lymphatic is going to get screwed. If you're at 400 pounds, I guarantee your lymphatic, your liver, your kidneys, your adrenals, your cortisol is already off kilter. If you're a male, every time your body produces testosterone, it's going to go into those fat cells, and it's going to convert it into estrogen, and it's just going to get worse from there. So eating less. Now, I have to admit, I know a lot of people get to this point because they live on the Taco Bell, Dorito, and lasagna diet. I understand that, and a lot of people try to undo the pain or undo the high cortisol or undo whatever it is with eating a lot more food, but those foods tend to be foods that are not going to do anything for you. So yes, I do realize it's a vicious cycle. Number 9. I've already mentioned always being told to exercise. People who are overweight like that already have high cortisol. So if you exercise more, because most of these people hate themselves, so they're going to do the most hardcore exercises they possibly can do, because they already hate themselves, and they're already going to try to torture themselves with some kind of high exercise. They see some skinny person do some burpees while holding a kettlebell in one arm and an iron club in the other hand, and they're trying to balance on a balance bar because they're idiots, and they're doing stupid exercises that completely nobody needs to do. And they try to emulate this stuff, and it raises the cortisol even more, and what happens? They get even fatter. Stop doing that. Number 8 is always getting health advice from everybody. When you are overweight, you will get health advice from everyone. Everybody. If you're 400 pounds and or 405 and somebody's 400 pounds, even they are going to give you health advice. Now, I know I run a channel that gives health advice, but I have lost a lot of weight. I've lost what most females typically weigh in some males. So, I have a leg to stand on here, but everybody, or like the worst by far, is the person who has always been the size of this pen, will always be the size of this pen. They're going to come up to you and tell you what to do all day. Maybe not as much with this, new way of framing things as, being fat is healthy. I don't really think that's the case. Maybe it's not as bad, but back in my day, back when I was that weight, everybody, especially in pencil man, is going to come up to you and say, well, you really should be doing this. Oh, okay. Number 7 is probably the most unfortunate, is how you feel about yourself. Now, I see a lot of this people acting like they're so happy to be fat, or wearing like fishnet and nobody wants to see that, or parading themselves around in barely any clothes like anybody wants to see that. They don't even want to see it themselves. So people who are, and it's even worse there. So people who are acting like they're happy with it, people who feel terrible about it, and you come to a place of shame, and shame is one of the worst energy levels that you can be at. It's like one of the lowest. If you look at the book Letting Go, there's a chart in there about, you know, different energy levels and hertz and where vibrationally you are at on this table or spectrum or whatever. And shame is like as low gets. So you don't want to be there, and most people are. And so when you're in a high level of shame, you're gonna pretend that you're not. So you're gonna like maybe buy fashy clothing, the latest and greatest, because you got to try to look the best you can. You're going to or go the complete opposite end and just basically try to wear nothing and parade around like you're so happy. You know, you're lying to yourself in all areas, and it's not good. Number 6, you don't fit anywhere. I remember when I was over 400 pounds, at this point I think it was like 420, I would take up the entire love seat. Like if there's, you know, like the love seat is like 2 cushions, like I would pretty much own I would pretty much own the whole love seat. And I only, it just, I couldn't have anybody else on there, because I'm like, can this thing handle this much weight? You know, like if there's me and somebody else, like, can it handle this amount of weight? So you start thinking about that as well. I'm seeing a lot of people having issues with getting on planes, on trains, in their own car. You know, you see these huge people in these cars, and you can see the suspension, like, you know, it's just killing the suspension. It's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable. Number 5 is you're really treated poorly. You're really treated poorly. Everybody treats you significantly different than they did when you were a normal weight. They almost have this like weird sympathy for you, or they have this animosity towards you, like, how could you do this to yourself? It's kind of like those two are the predominant. So you're either going to get the person that's always sympathetic, like, oh, you poor thing, or how did this happen to you? Or it's like, damn, you know, like, stop already. Or you get the, man, I mean, why would you do that to yourself? I mean, why didn't you just stop eating? You're an idiot. You should die. I mean, it's just one or the other. So that's number 4. And this was one of the ones that I had the hardest time with, because I was in Philly at the time, and Philly is fairly notorious for having a hard time finding a job, as it is, even when I was in really good shape. I could tell that I was being treated differently in interviews. I could tell. They didn't even want me sitting down. As soon as they saw me, you could see that gloss over in the people's eyes. They had already decided that you weren't going to be a candidate. I actually had a few times where I didn't even sit down for the interview. I excused myself and I left. So the interviewing part that one's rough. That's a rough pill to swallow. And that is one of the reasons I had a very hard time finding a job. Once I lost the weight, I noticed that I was getting job offers that I didn't even want. I had job offers coming from like Wall Street and a couple other places, like I'm not making that commute, that I didn't even ask for. You know, when because I initially, when I went raw vegan, I got down to about 225. I'm still to this day not 100% sure what caused me to not stay at that weight. And if you say you're eating too much, I will slap you through. I will slap you through the camera somehow. Just consider this, you being slapped. All right, so next one. Number 3. Clothing is tricky, because even when you go to the big and tall store, those companies don't really have, they'll like say like a size whatever, but every company is like different. Like if you, like I'm in normal sizes again, right? It's pretty consistent. But when you are in that range, and maybe this is why people barely wear clothes, it's so inconsistent. Like a size, like this is really embarrassing, but I was a size 54 or 56 jeans. I'll tell you where I was at. In like one size 54, I could fit my entire body in one leg. In the other size 54, like muffin top, like for days. So I'm like, how is there no consistency with this? So that part was terrible. So I basically was on the sweatpant diet, because I could go to Walmart, you know, with all the other fat people, and pick out my fat people clothes from Walmart. You know, like that month's or that year's, you know, Vogue in sweatpants designing. You know, that would fit. But it's hard on interviews when you're 405 pounds showing up in sweatpants. So I had to find something to wear. And that was, I actually had to have some stuff tailored. That's how bad it got.
Number 2.
This one I actually didn't have as hard of a time as other fat people that I've seen, like really fat people. I didn't have as hard of a time, but you know, when, like, misery loves company. So when you're really overweight, you kind of start talking to other people who are also overweight, so you can talk about how weight you are, so you can, you know, misery loves company. And I started to notice that they were like so winded by the time we got to the top of the stairs or wherever we were going. I mean, they were like damn near winded by just stepping in an elevator to go up the stairs, you know. So I didn't have that, luckily. I've always had high endurance. I've always had a high hemoglobin, so I think that was my savings grace with that. But most people, I just had a juice. It's doing something. I don't know what it's doing, but it's giving me gas. Most people have a hard time with this, so I figured I would include it.
Number 1.
I didn't even have to look at my little note sheet for this. Number 1 is so bad. I still remember this, and you can't wipe yourself. You can't reach. You're too fat. You can't go under, you can't go over. You can't clean in the shower. That one was, I've never felt so alone or lost. I remember the first time it happened to me, I was at Planet Fitness. I was finally trying to help myself. I was doing the traditional, and this is why I know this shit doesn't work. I was trying to starve myself and over-exercise to get out of this. And once I stopped doing that and actually overfed on the right foods, which I'm not going to talk about in this video, I'm going to talk about it in the next, another video, that is when the weight started coming off. But I've never felt so alone, or just desperate, or just hopeless. And that's another, if you look at the spectrum, the book's over there, that's why I'm pointing, it's right there. That's one of the lowest too. Like, I think like empathy, I forget what it is, apathy or whatever is like the lowest, but like the ones that I'm mentioning here isn't much farther. That is terrible. I remember I was at Planet Fitness. I really had to go. And I was like, what do I do? I can't reach myself. I cannot. You know, you ever seen a bear like doing this thing on the back of a tree? Like, I'm like, am I going to have to do this? Am I going to have to go out, find a tree or a pole somewhere and, you know, do what I got to do? It kept getting worse and worse and worse. I'm like, why am I exercising? And it's getting worse. I don't know what my final weight that I got to is. I know it's over 405. But there was a point where I was so heavy that I couldn't wipe and I couldn't clean myself. So that's number 1, 100%. That one, out of all of these, and I've got, you know, all of them written down here. Out of all of these, that one, I just felt isolated, alone, hopeless, like every just terrible thing. It was terrible. Anyway, if you're overweight like that, let me know down in the comment section. Did this hit home to you? Like, subscribe. I'll talk to you in the next video. I'm actually going to be changing up how I'm making this channel now. I'm going to be coming at it as what you can do as a severely overweight person, because I'm tired of fighting with skinny people who have no idea what the hell they're talking about with this field. You have no idea what you're talking about. If you have always looked like this, I don't want to hear it from you. I don't. You can keep your shit for yourself. Anyways, I'll talk to you in the next video.